Analysis of the Lucan portrait reveals similarities with Leonardo's painting style. If this painting were done by the Tuscan master, could it be a self-portrait? For 5 centuries, Leonardo da Vinci's appearance has been a never-ending subject of controversy. We know that the artist was born in Vinci, the Tuscan village that gave him his name. But his contemporaries left very few descriptions. The first biographies, written by Paolo Giovio, the anonymous Malia Becchiano, or Giorgio Vasari, are from the 16th century.
The only written descriptions we have of Leonardo da Vinci sadly come from people who had never met him, and in fact come from decades after his death. They're unanimous about how handsome he is, how he had long hair, how he had a beautiful curled beard, how he dressed incredibly well.
Other accounts enjoy depicting Leonardo da Vinci as a majestic scholar, the ideal of a wise man, a philosopher. This is why some people believe Raphael decided to give Plato Leonardo da Vinci's features in his fresco The School of Athens, painted in 1510 in the signature room at the Vatican. Pointing towards the sky, Plato/Leonardo embodies the humanist Renaissance thinker. He is positioned next to Aristotle, surrounded by major figures of ancient thinking whose faces are also borrowed from Italian artists, including Perugino, Bramante, or Michelangelo. The portrait in red chalk represents the artist with the features of an impenetrable old man. Until recently, it was considered to be the artist's only true self-portrait. This was the official representation of Leonardo's face. But a few years ago, it was discovered that this sketch was from around the 1490s, when Leonardo was only 30 years old. This cast doubt on the identity of the sitter. There remains the Windsor drawing. This profile portrait from around 1515 by Giovanni Francesco Melzi is the only pictorial evidence of Leonardo's appearance that hasn't been challenged. Leonardo da Vinci met Melzi in 1508. The young aristocrat from Milan wanted to learn to paint. The artist welcomed him as an apprentice in his workshop. Melzi stayed by his side for life. The question of Leonardo's face has always fascinated the art world. Some historians have ventured to say that the face of the Vitruvian man, or that of the young man in the Adoration of the Magi, belongs to the artist. Recently, a drawing which might be a self-portrait of Leonardo da Vinci was found in the Codex on the Flights of Birds. However, this is all pure speculation. This is an enigma in which portrait and self-portrait, real and fake, face each other off in an endless game of mirrors. To solve this mystery, Nicola Barbatelli decides to call on experts in facial recognition analysis. Several studies are launched. One takes place in Spain, in association with Christian Galvez. This Spanish researcher is the author of a study on the evolution of pictorial representations of Leonardo's face.
I've been in touch with the group who are specialized in morphopsychology of the Civil Guard, the UCO. They are facial recognition experts. They decided to apply the morphology ability towards art, and in this precise case, to the Tavola Lucana, to Melzi's portrait, and the alleged self-portrait from Torino.
The faces are analysed and compared to determine if there's morphological compatibility between the different portraits. In parallel, the faces are compared using dimensional parameters, such as the length of the nose, or the distance between the top of the nose and the chin. These two experiments came to the same conclusion. There is great morphological similarity between the face of the Lucan portrait and Melzi's drawing.
The man in the Windsor profile portrait and the one in the Lucan portrait are the same person. The only one that does not coincide with these images is the alleged self-portrait from Torino.
This result implies that the two portraits were done using direct facial measurements. We know that Leonardo da Vinci measured what he painted with a gauge.
He was incredibly precise with his measurements. In fact, he was concerned to find the proportions of the human body and the human face. He made drawings of many, many faces where he would break the features up. He would square them off and figure out the proportion. What are the relations of the forehead to the length of the nose? What's the relation of the width of the mouth to the length of the chin?
Several texts and drawings found in the codexes show his systematic studies of the human face. From the eyebrow to the junction of the lips and the chin, and from there to the angle of the jaw, and from there to the upper end of the ear near the temple, a perfect square is formed. One side measures half of the head. The faces represented on both the Lucan painting and Melzi's sketch look strangely similar. But how can one be sure that it is one and the same face? At Tallinn University, a 3D reconstruction experiment could provide proof. Orest Kormashov, director of the art history department, Helen Koch, a 3D designer, and Gianni Glini, consultant for the Lucan Museum, partner for this unprecedented research.
The comparison of Melzi's profile and the three-quarter Lucan portrait enabled us to identify the specific points between the two works which perfectly coincide and to create a 3D reconstruction of Leonardo's face.
3D consists out of triangles, right? So you have to use these triangles, and how you start building is that you have to have as many different angles from the face as possible. So in our case, it was this like some kind of angle plus the side face, and you just put these in the 3D program and you start to build the face in between.
In addition to the 3D reconstruction on the computer, Orest Kormashov tackled the modeling of Leonardo's face.
It was the idea to use different approaches. First, the classical one, that was in a form of sculpture, and the other was using the latest digital possibilities. Both absolutely different ways, and we were very curious if we come to the similar result. I realized this plastic model in a very traditional way. First, I modeled it from clay because it's very plastical, it's very easy to work with, and so this was something that was the most, of course, challenging.
A few days later, Gianni Glini came back to the university to discover the sculpture in 3D reconstruction. For the first time, Leonardo da Vinci's face appears in 3 dimensions, giving it an uncanny, realistic feel.
It was surprising that they were so similar. That also confirms that artistic approach is not something of just a fantasy, but it is quite well compared to that of scientific and numerical.
Questa è la prima ricostruzione di questo genere.
This is the first reconstruction of this kind on Da Vinci's face. You could say we were able to see what Leonardo looked like, as though we recognized him if we ran into him in the street.
Incontrandolo per strada.
But there was a problem matching the 3D reconstruction to the Lucan portrait.
Of course, the first thing we did was superimpose Leonardo da Vinci's reconstructed face onto the painting. And we got chills at that very moment, because the images did not correspond perfectly. When we looked to match the face at the level of the nose and mouth, we realized that the eyes did not fit. So we thought we had made a mistake, a reconstruction mistake. We had missed something. But what?
To answer this question, we must explore how self-portraits are made. Self-portraits first appeared in Florence during the 15th century.
Initially, the painter would put himself into a painting, into a crowd scene, as a kind of, I think, a memento that he was the one that painted it. It was almost like a signature that he was putting in. And he often makes eye contact with the viewer.
In his fresco in the Brancacci chapel of the Carmine Church, the artist Masaccio appeared as the last figure to the right of the circle of apostles, wearing a blue hat and dressed in red. Florentine artist Filippo Lippi represented himself in his altarpiece dedicated to the coronation of the Virgin. He is kneeling to the left, looking outward with his head resting on his hand. One of the most significant is undoubtedly that of Sandro Botticelli, Leonardo's good friend, who appeared in his famous painting, The Adoration of the Magi.
The second phase, then, is where the painter begins depicting himself in a portrait itself, where it's actually a self-portrait and standing directly before us and showing us his likeness. And that's a very different sort of thing, because if you think who in the course of the 1300s, 1400s, 1500s got their portraits painted, very important people. Popes, cardinals, very wealthy wool merchants. And so it's very significant when suddenly painters step out of the background and into literally the canvas, into the frame, and begin depicting themselves. And so we have someone like Albrecht Dürer, the great German painter and printmaker, Dürer deciding that he was going to represent himself, that he is important enough to show his features in a painting where there is no one else. I think it's saying, I want to be remembered. I'm important enough that future generations need to know what I look like.
Most self-portraits were painted in three-quarter view. In Italy, among the most famous are those of Antonello da Messina, Perugino, and Raphael. The artist is on a par with poets and philosophers. He is a fully fledged humanist. This is the message that Renaissance artists seem to be sending us via their self-portraits. We find the three-quarter pose in the Lucan portrait. But if we look carefully, we can see that the pupils diverge. The right eye looks straight ahead, but the left seems to be glancing slightly to the side.
The position of the pupils seems strangely disconnected, as if the pupil from one eye was looking in a different direction than the other. This particularity is flagrant in St. John the Baptist. It is slightly less obvious, but nonetheless present in the Mona Lisa, and can also be seen in the Lucan portrait.
Is this same asymmetrical gaze proof that the Lucan portrait was painted by Leonardo da Vinci? How can the divergence of the eyes be explained? The answer could be in Leonardo da Vinci's Atlanticus Codex.
Amongst Leonardo's optic experiments, there was what I would call a special invention, the chamber of mirrors.
In the B manuscript of the Codex, a text illustrated with a sketch in Leonardo's hand explains this surprising installation.
If you place 8 full mirrors, which are each 2 fathoms wide and 3 fathoms high, and you put them in a circle to make an octagonal mirror with a circumference of 16 fathoms and a diameter of 5 fathoms, a person on the inside will see each side to infinity.
There was a small figure standing in this octagonal mirror room with a brush in his hand like this. And this gave the idea that actually it is an artist who is standing inside. But why an artist is standing in the mirror room?
Could Leonardo da Vinci have conceived this installation to do his self-portrait?
To understand the use of the chamber of mirrors in practical terms, and if Leonardo da Vinci would have been able to use it, we have all the elements required to carry out a little virtual experiment. We know how the chamber of mirrors was constructed. We made a 3D reconstruction of Leonardo da Vinci's face, so why not put this 3D face in the chamber of mirrors and see what happens?
During the researches, we found out that this angle with which the portrait is shown matches exactly the position in the mirror room when you look at the angle.
If you look at the place where 2 mirrors of the octagon meet, they form a 22.5-degree angle, therefore a perfect 3/4 angle.
Thanks to this virtual simulation, researchers can now affirm that the orientation of the Lucan painting is precisely 22.5 degrees. But upon closer inspection, something seems off. The nose and mouth seem to be more in profile. How can these differing rotations be explained?
He understood in the 19th that humans are looking with 2 eyes on things. And this created an issue. And it created for him a really enormous issue because he wanted to represent in a painting reality, like we are looking at things. And how to represent something where we are looking normally with 2 eyes.
It is an enormous challenge for the artist because binocular vision enables us to perceive reality in 3 dimensions. It is the merging of 2 images in our brain, one from the right eye and the other from the left, which creates depth perception. As always, it was through experimentation that Leonardo da Vinci found a way to represent binocular vision in a painting. He took a sphere and drew the half seen by one eye and did the same on the other half with the second eye. And he realized that this produced a spatial perception of the object. Each half seems to stand out more.
Ma allora non era possibile
So,
che questa
isn't it
immagine
possible that in the Lucan painting,
fosse la
the two
sovrapposizione
images,
delle due
one from
immagini
each eye,
viste
are
prima con un
superimposed?
occhio e poi con un altro? E questo ci spiegherebbe il perché la nostra
That would explain why our computer
immagine
image can
vista
never
sul
match the
computer non
painting.
potrà mai coincidere con quella del dipinto.
The Lucan portrait could therefore be a combination of 2 points of view. The nose and mouth, oriented on a 40-degree axis, would have been painted with the right eye, and the eyes and the rest of the face oriented on a 22.5-degree axis with the left. This explains the different axes observed between the eyes, nose, and mouth. The virtual simulation showed that in order to merge the 2 points of view, the painter would have to have stood less than 30 centimeters from the junction of two mirrors. The light used probably came from a candle placed above to the left, which would explain why the left side of the face is bathed in warm light, while the right side is darker. The difference in the dilation of the pupils confirms this hypothesis. The left pupil near the light source is smaller than the right pupil, which remained in the shade. Did Leonardo da Vinci build the Chamber of Mirrors? Nobody ever found any proof. But the analysis of the Lucan portrait leads us to believe that the idea of this installation could have inspired the making of the painting.
What he did with the Gioconda and what he did with this portrait is he turned slightly around the head so that the line of the nose is hiding one of the most critical parts where you have to blur. And there he had a technique which we call normally as sfumato. He was the first one who did the sfumato based on the binocular vision.
The presence of sfumato in the Lucan portrait could be additional proof that it was painted by Leonardo da Vinci. But contrary to most of the paintings made by the Florentine artist with oils, the Lucan portrait was painted with tempera grassa, a mix of pigments and egg that has the specificity of drying more quickly.
If you have this new thought and idea how you could represent binocular vision, you make trials. You want to try it out, how it works. And this could be a very simple explanation why he didn't use the oil technique, which takes much more time.
For him, all his researches are only made to be used in art, because he considered art to be the possibility to visualize all this knowledge. So also with this portrait, it is not just the depiction of himself, but the summary of all his researches, all his knowledge.
Art and science. This is what hides behind the Lucan portrait. The painting's complexity sheds light on the Florentine master's vision. He considered painting to be an art that serves to better understand the world.